Let's do something different today. Let's take a look at life and why we want to lose weight or better our understanding or have mental peace or gratitude or anything like that, or appreciation for the higher functions of life. Why do we do any of that? This came about because I have occasionally run into questions from people about my own beliefs in context with references I have made about different things that I've said. For those who have asked, no, I do not subscribe to Christian theism or any theism, God belief at all. And I will tell you very briefly, I was once a pastor. I used to be a very religious person, and if you've searched around with my name, you can find evidences of that are still online. But I walked away from that years ago because I found that the answers to life are not found in any holy book. They are not found in a church, a mosque, a temple, a synagogue. They're not found anywhere except in the knowledge and appreciation of an individual's heart and mind, and that transcends language, it transcends borders, it transcends culture, it transcends race, it transcends everything, and everything from the lowest sentient life form all the way up to mankind. So far as we know, mankind is the highest. The enjoyment of life is what we would call godhood. If you really want my definition or take on it, that's pretty much it. If you disagree with my take on some of these things, that's perfectly all right. But when it comes to the human experience, I think you're going to find that we agree on quite a few things regardless of any type of religious beliefs. Now, I say that because I'm going to quote the Bible in this presentation, and I want to make clear that this has nothing to do with my belief in the Bible. I would quote the Quran if the opportunity came, and I have on a few occasions, or any other book. It's something that we can't limit to a religion, and we can't blackball a religion. We can't blackball any philosophy. There's wisdom in all of those great books. And of course, my Christian years defined who I am today, because I would be a different person. If before I was a Christian, I was a mystic. I identified with looking into matters like Bigfoot and Stonehenge and Lost City of Atlantis. My mind is everywhere. So I'm not approaching this from any type of an angle, and I'm just going to throw out what I believe here, because the culmination of my beliefs are in the living experience of being human. That's as close as I can tell you about what I believe. I don't limit myself to any one set of belief or lack thereof. So here's a life graph that you can see before you, and it deals with the progression of life in what I call ascension. Years 1 through 4, or 1 through 7, are the years, what I call the look-at years. They are the years where we crave knowledge in the cloak of innocence, dreams, and ego. We develop our ego in those years. So as soon as we learn to open our eyes and look around and learn what is hard and soft, we develop the ability to develop an ego, and it becomes bigger and bigger until we get to a certain point in the crunching years where we start to learn to minimize our ego. And it takes a long time. But the ego is at our foundational base of learning. I can remember when Kayla was such an easy child to manage. When she was just 2 and 3, when a lot of kids are crazy, I could reason with her because her brain is just so amazing. And I'm not going to brag on her just because she's mine, but because she's always been easy compared to Elena and Celeste and my nieces. They're wired differently, so they were a lot harder. But it's something that is fascinating. So these are the look-at years. When you get to 8 through 16, you get what I call the bright-eyed years. The world is a big and spectacular place. It's a place of self-discovery. The ego starts to build on its foundation, and it becomes finding out about everything around you. And of course, these are the years when your innocence reaches its peak before it collapses, before it falls in on itself, and you start to learn to manipulate and really steal and lie and do all the things that youth all of the sins of youth, so to speak. The bright-eyed years are also your formative years. They are where you learn the fastest. And they're also the place where your dreams culminate. I have heard it said by very wise people that what you wanted to do in life when you were 13 and 14 is probably what you should be doing, because you are most pure and yet advanced at that point in terms of your ambitions. So if you wanted to be a doctor or a football player or something else, you might ought to revisit those years if you have gotten off the path and have been divorced and have been, miserable throughout the years, because you're very pure in those years. These are the bright-eyed years where the formation of your learning is still, where your innocence is lost, but your life force is at its highest peak. But the problem is you haven't attained any wisdom yet, and as your life force rises and grows stronger, you're basically very low vibrating. You're close to the earth, but you're not above it in your mindset. So basically you are like a beast. You're an ambitious, driven beast. Your wisdom hasn't learned to equal your life force. And of course, if you look at statistics, you find that crime is mainly carried out by males between the years of 17 to 23. This is the time where you are most influenced by your testosterone if you are a man. Guys who are going to go out and rob liquor stores or follow in the footsteps of their abusive dads, they do that during these fire years because they're most brutish and most vicious and most seeking. They're most healthy because they've reached maturity, and yet they haven't reached mental maturity. At this stage, you're a dreamer, but you lack the ability to network, and you don't have self-knowledge. And so this stretches into the crunching years. So the problem for people who are in this particular age bracket is that you're very, very impressionable. And so all of that health, all of your good knees, all of your good strong muscles, your ability to put on muscle, your ability to fight off infection, it's so amazing. And all of the young people that work for me, I look at them and say, if only you could know how much I look at you and see what you could do with the world, what you can do right now. You're amazing. You can change lives, and your health is at its peak. You're never going to feel better than you feel right now. But of course, they don't appreciate that, because to them, that's the default way to feel. They just get up and they take for granted that they have no problems with their joints. They have no problems with the oxygen uptake when they're running a 6-minute mile. They have no problems. I mean, it's something amazing that they don't appreciate because they don't have the hardware. And of course, it's like the Dutch proverb, you are too soon old and too late smart. So you don't realize the problems that will pop up for you. But these are the volatile years. If you can make it through these years without a criminal record and without your first ugly and bitter divorce, then you're doing fairly well. But then that transitions from the fire years to the crunching years. The crunching years is where you do the most of your actual grinding out to make a living, to establish a career that will follow you forever. You relish fitting into a role. You absorb details with undue emphasis. In other words, you learn to do a trade. You acquire your skills during this period. You go from career to career. And of course, you do that because you haven't found yourself. Going from the fire years to the crunching years is a tough thing because you haven't found yourself. And of course, I tell these young people, some of them want to move up very fast in the world. Some of those who are maturing faster than the younger ones, they say, I want that corner office. And of course, they don't say that in so many words, but I can tell what they're thinking. The truth is, I'm going to get that corner office. You're not going to get that corner office because I paid my dues. And it's different when you're in the crunching years. You're not stable enough. I did another video on why young people tend to be so foolhardy with the way they put on weight, like I did. And of course, I got somebody who fired back at me and said, well, not all young people are that way. Well, of course, that's true. But the problem is it's true today. It may not be true in 2 years from now. If you're 22, and by the time you're 24, you may be a totally different person because you haven't found yourself. You're grinding out the levers and you're experimenting. as if your body were and your mind were a machine. You're finding out what you like. You're experimenting sexually. You're finding out the type of woman or man you like. You don't know yourself, and it's so painfully obvious to those who have been there, and uh, so impossible to see to those who are there. And that's why you don't get the corner office. You don't get to move up in your career usually. Yes, there are exceptions. And by the way, there are exceptions with all of this. There's always those who are able to to jump into a role at 21 and quickly be promoted and quickly retire, when they're 31 or 35. That's going to happen, but it's not going to happen very often. You gather most of your life skills here, and this is where your wisdom slowly starts to be settled into, let's say, a pyramid of wisdom. You're starting to learn. And of course, the better you do in these years, in the crunching years, the better you will do in as you get older and your body starts to decline. Remember, you stop growing at 26. That's when you're actually really an adult, because you have your spinal column, all of that. Any doctor can confirm your age by looking at how close your vertebrae are. And it's something very simple, because your body's not where it needs to be, and nor is your mind. You're not done making connections. You're not done establishing patterns of thought and habit. And then you have where you will do the greatest things in your life usually, the ascension years, 37 through 52. And again, by the way, this does not mean after these years that you're worthless, you're not able to do anything. More on that in a second. You realize in this period of life the value of service to others. You realize that life is circular, that everything you have done patterns off of what you have done before. Go back to what I said about the crunching years and learning to utilize the skills that you create, that you've made. You rethink your older views. It's so very easy for a 22-year-old to come up with a life philosophy. Well, here's my philosophy on that. Oh, no, boy, you're going to rethink it many times until you realize that everything is cyclical, just like the Native Americans used to believe about. We could really step out on a limb here with the Mayan calendar and talking about the Native American wisdom. Let me tell you, folks, the greats, the ancients of every culture knew this. They knew how to track the stars and how to track comets and how to track meteors. They knew even before we knew a thing about observing the planets, because they were able to look at life and see that there are cycles. And of course, Solomon said there is a time and a place for everything, and a season for everything under heaven. Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 1. And of course, you realize that overreaction is worse than no action at all. You start to realize that there's a skill behind not making a problem where one is not there. Don't make things worse. Make things better. Some problems will solve themselves, and of course, others will not. And the wisdom is found in you knowing the difference. That's where the challenge is. So you grow and you start to be of value to others because you are most balanced in your decision making. Your ascension years are where you will accomplish great things, because you can look at people and accept them for where they are in life and not judge them over critically, because you will be able to see in them yourself in the past, or perhaps you won't, but you will be able to look at them and evaluate what they are capable of and what they are not capable of. You'll be able to look at them and say, here's where I can fit this puzzle piece in. I can say, here's what this person is good at. Here's how I want to use them. Here's how they will make me better. And of course, you're constantly realizing the value of wisdom and knowledge, as opposed to the way you used to see it as just a tool to advance. Now you see it as a tool to better your world, your causes. You take up causes and you start to wonder about your roots. You start to realize your family roots are wonderful, because your past can tell you about your future. You can look at certain people in your family and see your future. You really can. You are patterned off of an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent or great-grandparent if you just look and study your roots. And it sounds kind of hammy to say that, but it's really true. The ascension years are where you are going to add, for most of us, the greatest chunk of your value. And then we have the final category, the story years. What do I mean by story years? I mean by story years, your ambition has given way to the stories that you can tell. Your wisdom has reached its pretty much its peak. And though you keep learning and valuing all the things you learned in the ascension years, you're now getting the most joy from watching others better themselves and learn. Your patriarchal or matriarchal instinct is something that comes into high gear. And you start to see your role as a nurturer and caretaker as opposed to someone who is bettering themselves. Whereas in the ascension years, you're still doing your star is shining at its brightest. Now your star is fading and the stars of others are taking off, and you are instrumental in that. Think about how many people, and I look back at my great-grandparents that before they died, I got to see them, and I didn't have the wisdom at the time to understand anything they were telling me. We have old sauerkraut cabinets from, we're related to the Wellers, the Weller pottery people up in Ohio, and all of our German ancestors, they're still up there. We don't get to see that part of the family as much anymore, but they were able to tell us, they traced our ancestors back to the Mayflower and told us many stories about the Great Depression and about being of value as a person. Well, I was all of 8 years old, about 13 years old when they died, so I didn't have the wisdom to listen to it. But if, for those of you who are hearing this, stop this right now and go and make contact with your grandparents and great-grandparents. Take them to Cracker Barrel or wherever old people go. Love them and listen to them because they can tell you something about yourself. They absolutely can. And it may sound, again, kind of silly for me to say that. It may not resonate with you, but if you are in a place in life, you get to a point where you can appreciate your roots because it says everything about where you have come from and therefore where you are going, because again, life is cyclical. But the story years are impressive because everything you have pretty much heard, you have seen someone struggle with, it's the same pattern over again. You have gotten down all the patterns you observed before. And whereas your thinking may not be what it once was, or it may be better. There are lots of studies that show that your mind sharpens through about 81 years old because pattern recognition gets better. Whereas a lot of people like to crack jokes about people in their older years, your ability to rely upon your lessons learned increases. That is a great value. And then, of course, life comes full circle. You go throughout your life in a state of ultimate productivity, and just like you came into this world unproductive, relying on others, you go out of this world relying on others, depending, of course, on a lot of different things. But, of course, here's the meaning of it all. And I get people sometimes that ask me, they say, why don't you smile more? Or they say, why don't you laugh a little or something? And I like to reply with Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 18. And, of course, that verse says that in the acquisition of knowledge comes much grief. I'm not unhappy. I'm not negative. And none of the things that I have said are. But the ability to know yourself is a very grief-stricken process, because look at all the things, look at all the factors that we face when we come into this world, the fear, the uncertainty, and then that gives way to foolishness, which gives way to futility. But in all of that, behind all of that is the divine spark, if you want to call it a divine spark. I don't care about your terminology. It's through the misery that we come to know ourselves. It is through the slow and often perilous climb upward in wisdom that we are able to better ourselves, that we are able to live. And so, whether you believe that God was made in the image of man, or man made God in his own image, the result is the same, because the higher functions of life, the appreciation for everything that we have and hold dear, comes only from that seed of knowledge that we acquired through carving out our place in the cosmos. It comes learning the same lessons and appreciating the same things. And the only way we really better ourselves, the only way we really reach the great pinnacle of personhood and enjoy life, is to be of service to others, to make ourselves more valuable, which gets back to why people meditate, why people pray, or why people fast. They do it to be closer to God or whatever they esteem to be God. And that's the magic behind it. The magic is we leave ourselves for others. We do unto others. We go out of our way to share things about our lives that will help others in their own climb up the mountain of what it means to be human. So the next time you fast, the next time you enjoy the solidarity, the peace of mind that comes from being in a state of deprivation, think back on these things and realize that the greater good, the reason you're doing any of this is because you want to be the best version that you can be. And being the best version that you can be means helping everybody else be the best version that they can be.